Hi, this is Moby. Welcome to the Fire Show. How, as a business, do you not create mediocre content? How do you stand out in all the noise on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram? How do you make content for your audience that they actually give a shit about? I mean, I could guess about this stuff, but I have a show, so I can just interview the perfect person for this. And that person is Meredith Rose, social media strategist, instructor, and speaker, who joined me after her panel on making hella good content at Social Media Week Austin. In this episode, we break down how to strategize and plan your content creation, how to promote it, and how not to screw it up. You can follow Meredith on Instagram at Miss Meredith Rose and on Twitter at Miss Meredith Rose. Let her know you enjoyed her stuff, because I really did, and I constantly think about her formula about making content when I'm actually making it. Ladies and gents, enjoy. Hi, Meredith.
Hi, Moby.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Tell me about your week. Where are you right now?
Well, it's the last day of Social Media Week. It's been quite a whirlwind, but it's always exciting. This is the second year Social Media Week's happening, and I have two dear friends who've brought this to Austin, and I just think it's the coolest thing. A bit long overdue,
yes,
honestly. Mm-hmm. There's a huge marketing community here that I think is really benefiting from this space and this time to talk all this nerdy social media stuff, and so I'm just happy to be a part of it. And I finished one session on Monday, and now I'm gearing up for my last session today. So.
What were those sessions? Those bookends for the conference?
Yes. They put me at the beginning and the end, I think, just to really put it all together. Mm-hmm. No pressure or anything. So my first session was on Monday. I talked, my session is called Hella Good Content. Mm-hmm. Which I think is a little bit of a link bait, that it's like, ooh, what's hella good content? It sounds, check that out. So that was my first class, and I've been teaching that for about a year and a half now. I designed that course myself. And then my second class this afternoon will be with blogging for business. Okay. So more focused on the tactical, strategic side of developing a blog for your brand or business.
Mm-hmm. There's no hella or something else in that?
No, we just kind of kept that one simple.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that works. So, if I'm a business starting out, how do I define hella good content? Because what I can do in 10 minutes is set up a Twitter, mm-hmm. set up an Instagram, set up a Facebook, put a few $100s and say, I make content because mm-hmm. I post a photo of myself every week mm-hmm. and something else. How would you define hella good content? Yeah,
so my formula for, just going back, content is super intimidating, right? It's what we all can do, but doing it well. And then when we start talking about how engaging is your content, or how does your content convert your biggest customer, then it's like, oh, I don't know if I'm doing it right. Yeah. And businesses especially get very overwhelmed with how much good content costs from a resourcing perspective. If they need to hire somebody to create content, reality is you can do it yourself if you just know the formula of what makes good content. And so I really try to break it down into three main areas. It's very simple. Mm-hmm. Hella good content is equal parts useful, so it has a utility factor to it. It is equal parts relatable, and it is equal parts entertaining.
Okay.
Now, a lot of content will usually veer towards one of those three areas more than the other two. Good content will usually encompass both. Okay. A piece of thought leadership that's positioned as an entertaining how-to video, encompassing utility and entertainment, right? But then the key is to make it hella good. How do we make that pretty good how-to video that has some energy and is engaging on YouTube? How do we make it relatable? And then it becomes hella good.
What do you mean by relatable?
By relatable, I mean that the audience responds to it in a way they feel like that piece of content is speaking directly to them. A really great example of this that I actually use in my class is Dove, right? Dove is a brilliant brand. Why? Because they went from being a women's hygiene brand to being a women's empowerment brand through their messaging, right? Hardly ever do I think about Dove's deodorant. I think about how Dove tells me to embrace my curls. And I realize the irony that I'm not embracing my curls today.
Yeah.
Regardless, when you look at their messaging, it's entirely relatable to women because they're speaking directly to them. So that's Dove. They have a ton of money. They have a ton of people, brainstorming these ideas. On a very specific level, if you are a business, local business, and you're attracting a certain type of customer, say you're attracting creatives, let's just call that, thinking about what creatives care most about, what their pain points are, what their main challenges are, and speaking directly to that and saying, we get it, this is how we're going to help you solve the problem. That makes your content not just like informative and fun, but it makes it relatable because they feel like that business or brand is speaking directly to them.
So you have to know who your customer is.
Have to.
What their pain points
Number
are.
one.
And where they are. Right.
Yeah.
How many people, let's say, fuck up and don't know that?
I think people just assume. They don't do the work. They don't do the work that goes into understanding who your customer is. They assume that their customer at times is maybe themselves, Oh, yeah.
I understand my customer. Yeah,
right.
Sure.
How many times are you in a room where you're like, well, I think that's a good idea? That
All
seems like
the
a
time.
great idea.
Yeah.
And I work for Deloitte, right? My target customer at Deloitte is not me. So I'm forced to think about who our target customer is. It's a CEO, CFO, a huge C-suite executive of a big Fortune 500 company. I am not that yet, right? More aspirationally thinking about my customer than who I actually am. But so I have to really force myself to understand their challenges, what they're looking for, their behaviors on social media, online. So a lot of people just don't put in the work. They think they know, but they don't know. And so that's the biggest thing I see. And it's why I always force in almost all of my classes, be it social media strategy or content, I force them to think about their customer and develop an actual persona. Not just how old they are, not just if they're a man or a woman, or if they live in Austin or they live in Singapore, but who are they? What do they care about? What motivates them? Are they motivated by convenience, by price, by quality, right? We could assume that the people who are buying Tom's shoes are motivated by something bigger than just wanting new shoes, because they could buy shoes anywhere, right? So how can we speak to that motivation in our content?
So how would you validate? So you're in the first meeting with a client or with your own team, and you're trying to understand the customer, and you bring out these assumptions, and you talk about this is what they're motivated by, this is what they want, these are their problems. How would you start validating that and say, okay, this one is great, we were spot on. Yeah, this one not so much, and we shouldn't focus on that.
Yeah, it's interesting because I always consider myself a creative and a big idea person, and I like to think about this messaging. Even when I was talking about Dove, it got me excited thinking about creating such great messaging and knowing that would really relate to my customer. But you brought up a really good point, Moby. How do we know for sure? And so you really have to, as a marketer, balance the creative piece with the data piece. And then sometimes it's very challenging, right? It's okay, because that's the next question I get from my students. Oh, so we want to know this information about our customer, but A, where is it? And B, how do we know it's actually true? And so I suggest a lot of tools, analytics tools, to kind of drill down who your current audience is. One of my, I think, big hidden gems when it comes to understanding your audience and their behavior is Facebook Audience Insights. Facebook did not pay me to say that. But I think that it's a free tool available to anybody who has a company page. And you can get a real big look and line of sight into who the Facebook audience is, and specifically who your Facebook audience is. And not only, again, where they live, who they are, but what type of purchasing behaviors do they pay with credit cards? Do they own a home, rent a home? What kind of car do they drive? You're starting to develop a person, and you have real data to back that up, because the great thing about social media and even Google, right, is they know a lot more about customers than we do. And we just have to understand the tools the ways to get that information and use it for our own purpose.
So know as much as possible about that person.
Yeah, exactly. It's very creepy, right? Yeah. I mean, you think that you're just scrolling through Facebook and RSVPing to events and liking your friends' cat photos, and all of that is being documented and stored for an advertiser to then retarget to you. And it's not a bad thing, and people have a lot of issues with that. And I say, if you're giving me content that I care about and that is really targeted to me, then I'll interact with it.
Absolutely. I remember there's 2 companies whose 8-minute ads I've seen multiple times. I've gone on their page and watched it. Purple, the mattress company.
Yeah.
They're paying me for this. I'm kidding. And
Facebook and Purple, thanks.
Yeah. And ClickFunnels. Have you seen that ad?
I have not.
It's really good. It's 8 minutes. They talk about a gold digger, like an actual gold digger. He's the persona. He's the
that's
actor.
Funny.
And I've watched that about 4 times. It's long, but when you make something, I was thinking about that when you said relatable. I could feel that person's pain and why they're talking to me.
Right.
That was interesting.
Right. Well, our attention span is less than a goldfish right now, and so.
Sorry, what did you say?
Our attention. He got me. Damn it. Yeah, so we have to really, more than ever, prioritize the content we're creating. We can't just put mediocre shit out there anymore. It's just our brains just don't tolerate it.
Yeah, absolutely.
As consumers.
And we're used to that. Even like Instagram stories, it takes half a second for us to realize this is crap. I'm going to skip this.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. I know. Think about it. It's 15 seconds of your life, and you're still intolerant to it. Yeah.
We're just horrible people generally. So we've talked about. So if you and I were going to a room and talk about our client or who we're trying to make content for, we understand them. And we have a certain amount of resources. What other questions do we start talking about when it comes to how many resources do we allocate to this in terms of time and people?
Yeah.
What channels? What questions do you ask yourself and the team?
Yeah. So from a channel perspective, because resources do start there. If you certainly have a presence on every channel, then it's going to require more resources than just one. But I really stress a lot of pro marketers will say, if you really want to make an impact, you need to be everywhere. You need to be on Instagram, Twitter, Pinterest. You need to be everywhere. And I do agree with that. But I think for a lot of smaller companies and brands, and typically my students that I see are coming from those areas, they're working on smaller budgets and they're working on smaller teams. And they are thinking, okay, where do I want to invest the most of my time? And I say, well, where is your customer? And what are the strengths, limitations of each channel? And for instance, if you're on Twitter, you better believe that you need to be creating regular content for Twitter. The lifespan of a tweet is 17 minutes. You have 17 minutes to make magic happen on Twitter.
Yeah.
On Facebook, they give you a day and a half, right? Okay. If you post something Sunday morning, you'll still see it around Monday afternoon. Right? So that means that you need to create much more content for Twitter. So if your audience isn't on Twitter and it's going to give you a bunch of, it requires a lot of resources, then maybe Twitter is not the channel that you focus your efforts on right now. So you really have to understand each channel and then come up with a channel-specific strategy. My whole thing is no channels created equal, and they're usually designed for specific brands in mind. Instagram is definitely becoming a bigger channel opportunity for B2B brands, but it's harder for them to execute on Instagram because they're not visual, like a travel or a food or retail brand where they can totally execute a good strategy on Instagram.
I mean, they could be possibly used to giving out strategy reports that are 20 pages versus how do you tell what your company's about in one image?
Yes.
It's a difficult thing to do.
It's so hard. And I have a whole nother class. I'm just like, I have so many classes. I have another class that's specifically Instagram for business because I think that channel in particular, and if we're talking about content, I think some of the best content is on Instagram. And it's the most kind of diversified content, live, stories, images, and it's the most engaged with channel as well. So people who are on Instagram are likely way more engaged with that content than they are on other channels. So it's a huge opportunity there for brands, whether you're a B2B or B2C. But anyway, so that's one thing that you have to look at the channels, what fits best for you.
Yeah.
And then I always, from the get-go, and this was 10 years ago when I was like first starting my career, I always believe in having a dedicated resource for content. I think that people make the poor assumption that content can be an afterthought, or it can be done in conjunction with another job, right? I think there's a statistic, and I probably shouldn't bring up statistics when I don't know them for sure, but it's definitely more than 50% of social media content creators serve a different function at their company as well. Be it, they're also in charge of email, or they're also in charge of account management. And I really believe that if you want to invest in creating hella good content, that you invest in a resource that's going to be dedicated to it. Mm-hmm. And even at the smallest of companies, I think that is worthy of your time, especially in 2018 online.
I love what you said before, which was don't make mediocre shit.
100%.
Can't do that anymore.
There's a ton of it out there,
yeah.
And I think a lot of people just get scared that they're not posting enough. Mm-hmm. Because there's that 17-minute scarcity, right? Well, if I'm not posting a lot on Twitter, then I'm losing my audience. And I think it's about finding a balance, honestly, because I would way prefer you to spend some time on creating really good content and then and testing it and optimizing it, as opposed to just throwing spaghetti out the wall and hoping it sticks.
Yeah.
Right? That's the worst thing you can do.
True. So thinking about, you mentioned earlier how Instagram is one of the most creative places. Mm-hmm. I love what some people do, which is they take a photo, screenshot anything on the internet, put in their story, and in subsequent stories, they highlight different parts and talk about that. Mm-hmm. I just love that started with Instagram.
Yeah.
And these small things really develop and make me feel these guys are really competent at communicating.
Yes. Well, the key with Instagram is it's almost forced everyone to sort of think like a videographer, or almost like a director a bit, right? Like you have to storyboard out your content. And I think that we always should have been doing that, but it's easier to get away with it with not doing that when you're just posting a photo in a blog article. Mm-hmm. But with Instagram stories, my biggest advice for people is to really take us through the story, the beginning, the middle, the end, have moments for us to capture good tidbits, but really treat it like a full story, and like you're directing it. Uh-huh. And one thing that we've done that I designed at our company was a day in the life, to feature some of the people that work for us and to attract talent on that channel. And it performed immensely well because we coached these individuals on telling stories through visuals and boomerangs and graphics and all of the cool things that you can be creative with on Instagram.
And you planned all of that?
We did, yes. It was specifically for featuring our millennial talent because, as you know, everyone's hiring millennials right now. So that's who we're trying to attract. And at a company like Deloitte, it's a Big Four accounting firm. Sometimes that doesn't feel as sexy to your 22-year-old coming out of college. And I get it. But we wanted to show, here's what's also really cool and badass about working here from their perspective. Mm-hmm. Relatable content.
Oh, sweet. I love that.
Just plugging that in.
Plugging that in. And also just plug in your courses and all your website.
All that stuff.
Yeah. So we've talked about principles. Mm-hmm. And now, hypothetically, I bring these situations up all the time. Mm-hmm. We're sitting and we've decided we're going to make content for the next 3-4 months. We have an idea of the channel, the resources. How do we start planning that out? Okay, I can think about 2-3 posts, mm-hmm. but how much planning should I be doing for the next 3 months?
Yeah.
To minimize my headaches down the line.
Right. Well, something that once you do the hella good content exercise and you're thinking about what the pain points of the customer mm-hmm. are, what I encourage people to do is come up with content buckets. And those buckets should speak directly to the key themes that you identify as challenges with your customers. So for example, if you're working with a CPA or a financial planner, right, a local financial planner, and they find that their top challenges from their target customers are they want to get out of debt, and they want to buy their first home, right? So those are 2 content buckets for me. So now everything that I create is going to fall under those content buckets. Now it's up to me to create content for them that is useful, that is entertaining, that is relatable. And then I map those like more sub-content pieces on an editorial calendar.
Okay.
And what I do to diversify how I'm presenting this content and to give it sort of a long tail effect, since, resourcing is always an issue. And it's like, well, I'm not going to be able to write a blog every day on this, right? So you write a blog once a week on that, and then you do an Instagram story on it, and then you do a series of like shortcut videos that you can post on Instagram maybe 2 weeks later to remind people of this piece of content you created. And then you have an email newsletter that is told from a different perspective. Use all these channels based on what their strengths are on that channel, and you repurpose that one piece of content and package it out for each channel.
Oh, wow. So what all can I do?
Did I blow your mind, Moby?
Exactly.
No, I mean, it's actually a lot simple. I just think people that get caught up in how much content they have to create, and really, they just have to create really focused content, a few really good pieces, and then learn how to repurpose it and repackage it over time.
So I think in terms of audio and video usually, which is if I have a video like this, I can make separate clips from it.
Exactly.
I can use the audio for audiograms, put graphics in it. I can have quote images, and I can write a blog post, get it transcribed, the actual podcast episode, images. What can you do with a blog post? What all just comes to your mind right now?
Blog posts, yeah. I mean, I think that the visual element with blog posts is crucial, right? How can we make... because usually the best blog posts are sort of listed tips, right? Or how-tos or things like that. And so how can we make that graphical, right? How can we create, if it's 5 tips for increasing your productivity this spring, how can we make like 5 graphics that we can leverage on other channels that are more graphic heavy channels? How can we bring in an expert to speak on that for like a 30-second video? How can we maybe take somebody who's executing these tips and document their like most productive day on Instagram?
Okay.
Like, how can we take that content and use these other channels to best illustrate that content in the context of that channel?
And where do you keep all this stuff? In a calendar, in your notes app? Because we need to store all of this.
Of course.
Yeah.
So this sounds very weird, but because I've been doing this for a while, and I, worked for very big companies with very big budgets, and I could probably have whatever I wanted in terms of content management. I like an Excel spreadsheet. I gotta be honest with you. And even better, a Google Sheet that's shareable across your team members. I think that it serves the best purpose. It's the most useful. It's the most customizable than some of these other big expensive products. And you keep everything in a Hootsuite template or Hootsuite or Excel template. I use the Hootsuite templates that are available to download for free, and I just customize them. And I map out, I always recommend mapping out your content ideas about 90 days in advance. So, and that also allows you to plan for things that may be coming up that are seasonal, right? So if you're Torchy's Tacos, you better know when National Margarita Day is or Cinco de Mayo, right? That's important for you, right? We got to pay attention to those fake holidays on Twitter. That matters. So knowing when those are coming up so you can plan content in advance is good. But you don't have to write every single blog post 90 days in advance. Yeah. You just have to be thinking about it.
But being proactive about content. Not
exactly.
Oh my God, shit, it's Halloween. What do I do?
Right. Okay. And that happens so much.
It happened to me.
Yeah. And it's a very reactive approach, and it usually doesn't end up giving you the results that you want. Yeah.
What common mistakes do you see? There's 2 kinds of people.
Sure.
There's actual marketers and then people who call themselves marketer.
Oh, yes.
And so in the second bucket, what do you see, what mistake do you see them making? I can see your smile. What mistake do you see them making, which will always keep them in that bucket, which is not very savvy in their marketing efforts?
I think that, the biggest mistake I see is that they're not setting their objective ahead of time. They know they should be creating content. They have they have a piece of content that they want to promote across social media. They know they should be doing that, but they don't know what they're trying to achieve with it. And so then after we run a campaign on this piece of content, and we do all the things, whatever, they don't know how to measure the success of it. And it sounds really simple, but it's actually very difficult to have people come up with SMART objectives. And I say SMART for a reason, because SMART stands for SMART, specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound. And it forces you to think about what you want to achieve in a much more measurable way. It's not just, we want to generate more leads to our contact form. It's like, we want to generate leads from where? By how much, over what period of time? And then we can really see, was that piece of content, that campaign successful? And so then, should we do it again? What can we learn from it? Because if you don't know if you achieved your objective, how are you supposed to move on from there?
Absolutely.
It's the biggest mistake I see. It's something I force my students to do, along with getting audience personas, tight and depth. It's the second big thing I ask them to do, is create SMART objectives for their social and content campaigns.
Yeah, because you've got to adjust. Not everything works all the time.
Exactly. Completely. I think optimizing is a huge other piece of it. You get a bit, if you've worked on content and you get attached to it, you're like, this is the best shit ever. I'm the smartest person in the world for coming up with this idea. And then it bombs. There's a reason it bombed. The reason may be your fault. The reason may not be your fault, but it's okay it may hurt your ego initially, but then it's like, what can we learn from this? And maybe something's not working. Let's go into the data. Let's see where we lost people down the funnel, and let's change it. Let's optimize it. I think people should be doing that throughout the campaign. They shouldn't just be doing it once, a campaign has wrapped. Optimize, in the moment.
And know what's happening.
100%.
So if I were, two questions. Number one, if I was getting just into content.
I've overwhelmed you.
It's wonderful. It's wonderful. If I was getting into content right now.
Yes.
What skills or platforms, what skills or softwares in analytics or something like scheduling, Hootsuite, Buffer, should I be knowing when I start?
Yeah, so the three tools that I teach in your most basic social media content strategy-esque class are Facebook Audience Insights, which I mentioned. And every tool that I teach is free because I want it to be accessible for anybody. In my various roles, I use some enterprise tools that aren't accessible to people. Obviously, I would recommend those if you had the budget for it, but many people don't. So Facebook Audience Insights is free. So I recommend learning how to look at audiences in a more strategic way and building audiences. I suggest a version of a social scheduling or listening platform. That could be Buffer, that could be Hootsuite, whatever suits you best. I usually teach Hootsuite, and what I teach people to do in Hootsuite is not just to manage all their channels from one place so they can kind of map out their content ahead of time, but I actually leverage listening in Hootsuite a bit more too, because that's also a free option, which basically means to listen to the topics and industry trends that are related to your brand or business and see what people are saying about it. If I am a local Austin financial planner, I want to know what people are saying about that space online. And that may do two things. It'll tell me a little bit about my competitors, who else they're talking about. It'll tell me about my user, because maybe they're saying that there's no resources for them in getting a CPA or affordable CPA in Austin, right? Maybe that I learned that through my social listening, but then also it can give me content ideas. Because if I know that there's a deficit in certain knowledge, then maybe I can fill that void. So Hootsuite allows you to do that for free if you just search the right keywords. So that's the second tool. And then the third tool is Google Analytics. And
oh God, yes. Oh God.
Google Analytics is free. Right? You just set it up on your website, and now it's tracking all of the behavior and activity on your site. And that's where you're going to get a lot of the good, juicy insight that you can, then take away and optimize your campaigns later. Yeah. Those are the three things.
Marketing just isn't making pretty things. It's actually understanding and going into the data. And
I learned that the hard way, Moby. I'm like, I just want to come and spout ideas. And they're like, you kind of have to learn how to crunch numbers. My students will always, their eyes eyes will glaze over whenever I talk about the formula for engagement rate. And they're like, oh, we have to do math?
Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, you do. Yeah. Sorry.
Welcome to life.
Especially if you're like a one woman or one man marketer, right? And you're doing everything. Yeah, you got to do some division. It won't be long division, but it'll be something. Yeah.
It's hard. And if I were good at content.
Yes.
And
if you were.
If you were. I suck at it. And I listen to everything you said, and I just go after. Mm-hmm. What other tools, analytics, do I need to take myself from the 90th percentile to the 99th?
Like more sophisticated tools?
Mm-hmm.
Or, okay. So I think the next thing that you would want to think about is leveraging pixel tools. Is that a scary word?
No.
Okay. What pixel tools allow you to do, it's really just a form of code that is put into your website that tracks people coming from social media mm-hmm. and through the sales funnel on your website. And then the reason that the reason that you saw that ad 5 times or on Facebook or wherever you saw it is because that company had a pixel and knew that you had seen it and knew that you were more likely to engage with it the next time or the third time.
And this is in all channels? Facebook has one, I know that.
Facebook, and by default Instagram, because Instagram's owned by Facebook, mm-hmm. LinkedIn and Twitter. I'll have pixels, and that's how a lot of companies are leveraging things like retargeting, which is a good thing when it comes to content because social media really is a long con when you think about it.
Sure.
Usually people don't engage or take the action you want them to take within minutes of following your brand online. Usually you're developing a relationship with them. It's a bit like dating, right? You take them out for dinner a few times before they go home with you type of thing. So that's how I see it. And that's totally what I tell my students.
Yeah, it's a good analogy. It works.
I love to compare things to relationships. I think it's funny, especially when it's nerdy things like social media. But so it's a bit of a long con. And so understanding, who that exact person is who's engaged with you before, you're in a better position to then, retarget to them. And so I think that's sort of the next level of upping your game when it comes to content. Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what about scheduling? If I want to put out as much content as possible, mm-hmm. what tool do I upgrade to? Or do I just upgrade Hootsuite?
Yeah, I'd say, again, the tools that I think are best are Hootsuite Buffer. If you are a big Instagram user, I'd recommend Later or Planoly. Those are specific for Instagram users. You can schedule other content through those platforms, but like something like Later, you get to actually see what your next 9 tiles will look like, visually.
Oh, yeah.
So you can get an idea of what that will look like when someone visits your Instagram profile. So that's kind of cool. So it's just designed a bit more for the heavy Instagram user. So using all of those tools requires some type of investment. It could be a modest investment, like $10 a month, or some of the enterprise investments are upwards of thousands of dollars a year. It just really depends on what your needs are.
Cool.
Yeah.
You just blew my mind with so much all across the breadth of planning it, executing, and all the tools that we need for content. Hella good content.
Have
you trademarked that yet?
I probably should.
You probably should. You probably should. Yeah.
Well, leave it to me. Someone would probably come back and be like, I trademarked that years ago. And I'm like, ooh, whoops, I don't know.
Well, if you've been using it for a while, it's yours.
It's catchy. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. How can we find you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm at Miss Meredith Rose, MS Meredith, MEREDITH, Rose, ROSE, on Twitter and on Instagram. My blog, which I didn't mention, so some of the reasons that I know a lot about content creation is I created a blog a number of years ago to kind of pivot me into doing social for a living. And it's called Job Offers Bad Boyfriends. And the URL is joboffersbadboyfriends.com. And I talk about the parallels between job hunting and dating for being in the 20 and 30 something age. It's quite fascinating work.
Please tell me you're going to come out with a book about that.
Should I?
You should.
I mean, okay. Twist my arm. So I have a fun time. It's more of a creative outlet for me, but it's fun. And it helps me stay abreast to developing good content, which is always good. So that's me. I also teach at General Assembly in downtown Austin. So if you want to come check out one of my classes, you can feel free to do that too. Yeah.
Oh, thank you for this, Meredith. This was great.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Like the politician.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank
Boom.
you.